So as I promised on social media, this keynote is a little bit different. Just how Matt would have wanted it to be. I know some of you guys will be at church right now and are with us, so we just want to talk about how much faith has meant to our family, how much it meant to Matt. And I'm not here to push my my beliefs onto you, but I am here to put a rock in your shoe for you to understand that Matt is here on this track with us today, and God is watching over us all. At Mission 38, at the heart of our values is steadfast love, which is the love that Jesus shows us. I remember after Matt died, myself, Garrett, Dan, Matt's other best friend, and Kendall, we decided to go on a walk. And we picked a random place, and when we got there, Garrett and Dan realized that this is where they would all used to go to high school to have a few beers and do some underage drinking, safely, of course. But as we were walking, we passed this watering hole where they all used to swim, and flew above us two eagles. And Garrett looks at me and goes, "Dude, the last time I saw an eagle was when I was floating down a river with your brother." Now, the story gets way crazier, but I want you to keep in mind the history of mental health in our family on both sides. Matt's father, Tim Brewer, an amazing man, an amazing pastor who personally my soul feels connected to. He had a horrible accident, leaving him an amputee and also with a traumatic brain injury of his own, and he took his life. A world-renowned pastor and a man that was very respected. So I want you to keep in mind the parable of two here. Tim, after he was climbing, was in a tunnel, and the train didn't sound its horn, so he didn't know that it was coming, and it decapitated his leg. Now, when we were on this walk that day, on the way back, there was a set of train tracks, and my sister was like, "Hey, why don't we take the train tracks?" We're like, "All right, that sounds good." So we started walking down these tracks, and off in the distance, we see a pack of deer run across it. And there was two deer that stayed back. We thought they were llamas at first because there was a llama farm, and these two deers were white. They were albino. As we got closer to the deer, they just stood there. And like yesterday, I'm sure you guys remember too, it was this undescribable feeling of like chills running up and down your arm, and almost like a euphoric, very, very peaceful feeling as we got closer to these deer. And I just felt in that moment, I knew that Matt was in heaven with his dad, and that these two deer were sent by God as representation of them. There's a 1 in 30,000 chance that you see an albino deer, and we saw two of them that day. And I went home and I told my mom, and it just brought so much peace to our family. But then I went to my Bible and I said, "Hey God, if you're real, I'm going to open my Bible right now, and I want you to show me something." For anyone's ever done this, it never works that way, But I opened my Bible, and the first thing that I turned to was the parable of two eagles. Now, if that wasn't enough, I still struggled with my faith. And as we began to build Mission 38, remember on the 1-year anniversary of Matt's death, it took us 3 holes. Me and my dad went golfing. It took us 3 holes to realize that our card number was 38. The first office that Lucas and I had in Austin took us to show up there to understand that our office was on 3800 Lamar Street, or 3800 Lamar off of 38th Street, and our office number was 38. This mission is real. God is real. Everything that has happened was supposed to, but man, there's been some struggle too. I wish that I could say that the darkest moment of my life was when my brother took his life, but I'm actually coming out of the darkest moment of my life, and it's a place that I try not to go to. So if you want to hear kind of the whole story, you can go back and listen to my keynote in DFW. But I remember specifically, I was looking over 8 stories down in my apartment building, considering taking my own life. The only thing that stopped me from jumping was a picture of my mother and holding me as a child. And I said that I couldn't do this to her, and I couldn't do this to my family, and I couldn't do this to all of you. And then my mom called me, and she said, it was Sunday morning around this time, and she said, Brandt, at this point, the anxiety and depression was so bad that I couldn't get out of bed or leave my apartment. I was too afraid. And she said, Brandt, if you do one thing today, just please promise me you'll go to church. And as a promise to her, I went to church. And funny enough, the sermon was on suffering, and I was suffering pretty hard then. And it was about 1 Peter, and it talked about what the Bible says about suffering. Because we live in a broken world, suffering happens to everyone. As anyone who's a little bit older knows, this life is R-rated, right? And there is struggle, as we heard in that song earlier today. You have to be prepared for it. The Bible tells us to suffer not because God is punishing us, but because we live in a world with sin. And what the Bible also shows us through Jesus is the perfect blueprint of suffering. He's the only man in history that's ever suffered perfectly. So at the end of the sermon, it's what I needed to hear, but I was still just for anyone who's experienced depression or anxiety, your brain is sick, right? It's hard to process things. It's hard to, your executive function doesn't work. But at the end, the pastor said, it's a church about 5,000 people in Dallas, and he said, statistically, there's a lot of you out there that are suffering right now, and I'm calling you, I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm asking you, those of you who are suffering, to stand up so that we can pray for you. And my ego was like, no way, I'm not doing that. But then I was like, if you are who you say you are, and you are vulnerable, and you are strong, and you want to lead this mission, then you have to stand up right now. And I did, and I just felt the overwhelming sense of peace of the Lord, and people had their hands on my shoulder praying for me. And it was, again, it was a window into what life should look like. Unfortunately, it's not like you can just pray everything away, right? That's not how this works. It's not how faith works. It's not how God works. After this, I was with my friend who was taken back that I stood up and was crying and just said, hey, can you help pray for my depression? And so that was the first time really in my life that I gave my life to Christ, that I admitted to him all the sins that I had done in my life, from drinking to sexual sins to you name it. I'm broken just like everyone here is, and I need a Savior. And so I asked him to be that for me. And then afterwards, we went to lunch, me and my friend Brenner, and he told me, he said, dude, do you think you can do this anymore? Like, I don't think this is healthy for you to keep on, doing the 38 challenge and putting yourself in this position. And I seriously debated quitting, but when we went to lunch, this little Mediterranean place, when I was done eating, there's just like a couple pieces of rice. Think about the size of rice. And then I moved over a piece of rice, and think about it, how little a grain of rice is. And about half the size of that, there was a number on the plate, a little imprint, and you guessed it, that number was 38. I'm the only person in the world that would have seen that number, smaller, half the size than a grain of rice. And I have a picture on my phone if you don't believe me. Later that night, as I was reflecting, still in just a horrible place mentally, it kind of hit me what this whole mission is. Jesus died on the cross so we don't have to suffer. The 38 challenge, we suffer so you don't have to. That is what God did for us. He paid the ultimate sacrifice. He suffered so that we can live a life of peace and joy, and with him for eternity. So this isn't about me. This isn't even about Matt. It's about saving people on earth and then saving people in eternity. So Jesus is the only one to suffer perfectly, and the rest of us, we just have to do our best to try and suffer well. So how do we suffer well? Number one, lean on others when suffering. Understand that there's always, always hope. You have to keep taking steps, even when it feels like it's impossible. When your brain is telling you to stay in bed, you get out of bed. When the depression is telling you not to go to the gym because you're too tired, you're too weak, go to the gym. When the anxiety is saying, hey, you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to leave the apartment right now, leave the apartment. Call someone that you trust. Keep moving forward, because whether it's tomorrow, the day after that, a month later, a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, you will make it to the other side. Talk to me, talk to my mom, talk to a number amount of people who have made it through that season of life. It seems impossible, it seems hopeless, but you make it through. And on the other side of that is a beautiful, beautiful life filled with people who love you, filled with empathy, filled with clarity. And lastly, you have to have the strength to be vulnerable and to ask for help, because that is how we challenge the stigma. Thank y'all so much. I love all of you for coming out today. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you have any questions on my story, if you're struggling right now, come talk to me. If you have any questions about faith, come talk to me, and we'll leave on that. I love all of you guys so much. Thank you again.